1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Is there any additional considerations when you're tuning snare drums? And also snare drums like for marching also?
Yes.
Are you ready, Kurt? The marching sound now, especially from drum corps, to me is the most terrible thing that I've ever heard in my life. I think, and Kurt was in Vanguard. He was a legend in the Vanguard, and he'll tell you, I think, the same thing. Kurt, do you like the sound that they're getting now?
I hate it.
Absolutely hate it.
A little tight.
Yeah, same problem with pipe.
It's like the same thing with
Just
pipe.
hook up a ground
pipe
plate
bands.
on top. Straight out.
It
It's like
is-
playing my formica.
They put these Kevlar heads on the drum, crank them just as tight as they can get them.
Now Evans and they're actually working on some new heads that are just a little. They're starting to back off of that a little bit, I think.
There's even some talk of going back to Mylar.
Hallelujah.
As long as they, as long as they don't pull out,
Right.
which we've kind of fixed, but the whole point of the tension is, basically what they're playing, and they need to play so tightly together that essentially they're playing on a tabletop. But it is surprising
Or
they
a
get into
brick.
snare sound at all, but they do. But the whole point is they're trying to play a lot of notes per second, and play them together. And now they're working back toward tone. We actually have a Kevlar head out now. It's called it's -S. The S standing for soft. One thing we've learned, especially with younger people playing on those Kevlar heads, the high tension, they're killing themselves. It's a disaster for your wrist. So we've developed one for more people starting out, softer Kevlar, a little bit more give, a little bit more forgiving too, out front when you have 6 guys doing all the same thing, just a little bit more fat sound. But I was doing drum corps stuff back in the late 70s, and we did silver dot Ludwig drum heads, and you would crank them to the point where they'd pull out, but at least it was my part.
In a band situation, is there a way to tune the snare drum, at least the bottom side, so that you could minimize the buzz when you're not playing?
Usually detuning one rod on the top head will help that. You're always going to get sympathetic vibration. And the funny thing is, once you're 10 feet away from that drum set, you don't hear it.
It usually bothers the drummer more than anybody.
Yeah.
One of the things we've done, this is a set of pure sound snare wires that this is another one of our companies. We've developed these little feet and a center pull, so that when they actually sit on the snare side, they're pulling straight. What happens when you use string and other things is you're making a little bit of a bow in it, and that causes a lot of sympathetic vibration. Also, if you're not using good quality snare wires, one of them is probably a little bit loose, and that one's driving you crazy. So people do really smart things like take wire cutters. I'll cut that one off. They say, I'll cut that one off. It's like, my arm hurts. Okay, cut that off. But when you have good quality material to start with, it does minimize it, and this little plate helps a lot too.
I can attest to those snares. I put them on a lot of my drums, and it was amazing the difference.
I
wasn't sure if I was going to notice a difference, but it was like, whoa.
I was always the big believer in the cheaper the snare, the better, as long as it sat flat. And I was the same way as you. When they first came out, I said, oh man, that much for a set of snares? I was blown away when I used them. I wouldn't use anything else anymore.
And besides drum heads, it's the best upgrade you can do to your snare. But one of the questions about tuning the resonance side of the snare drum, it's basically the same as a tom head. So one of the differences you have with snare that makes it a little bit difficult is you have the snare bed. So it's, you might not be able to feel as good about it, but it's still going to sound right. Like, realizing that's where the tone comes from.
I tend to tune the bottom head on the snare drum a lot tighter than anybody would think.
Me too.
I really crank down on them.
Really, one of the best things that was said, Kurt, thank you, was, if you've got a drum set, you've got a 10, 12, 16, or 12, 13, just take one of the smaller toms. When you're buying drum heads, it's going to be you know, an extra $30, $40. You know, luckily for me, I can try as many as I want. But, you know, one of the things to do is now buy, like you said, a couple that you might not have bought. Just for that one drum and play with it. And wow, if I put this on all the drums, this is the sound I want. Then next time when you buy heads, now you've got something different. And both these guys, particularly Al, because Al's been doing this for 140 years. Did you say 140?
Yeah.
140 years.
That's me.
You know,
3 days longer than dirt.
You were there.
Yeah.
You know, you kept hearing it over and over.
Buddy
tonight.
Rich was a corporal when I started.
He wasn't even alive. So, you know, it was experimenting. You know, it's one of the things, you know, if you practice a half-hour a day, take one of those half hours and don't play. Take one of the drums off your drum set. Don't mess with all of them because then it gets overwhelming. Take one drum and just set the top where you want it and just do what Al did. Tune the bottom way up, tune it way down, realize the differences, play around with the different tensions on the top then, and then kind of figure that drum out. And then next week, figure out the next drum. And then figure out the next drum. But, you know, really, it comes from experimenting. There's no, you know, magic that says, watch this video and you'll know how to tune drums. The reason the star pattern used to be so important was because of the bearing edge issue. If you didn't do it evenly all the time, the head would shift to one side or the other. Because it's sitting here, so it's pulling it. But now that it's like this, it's not pulling it side to side like that. It's sitting flat on the bearing edge. So it does solve a lot of problems. I mean, this isn't intended necessarily to be an Evans commercial. But that's reality. That does make a big difference. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know.
I've experimented. I got to experiment like that in the studio.
Yes.
I literally got hired on a session, and they had me sit in a room with 6 floor toms and 5 or 6 different head combinations for those drums. And they started out by having me put calf on them, and then sat there and hit them and hit them and hit them. And they switched microphones and had me hit them and hit them and hit them. And then they said, okay, change the heads. Now we want to try this. And then they went through the whole thing. I sat there for 9 hours doing nothing but changing the heads on those floor toms and hitting them.
Did they get a sound they liked? Eventually?
Finally.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Jim Keltner walked in, and 5 minutes later he was done with the session and out of there. You know?
One of the
Not a good tom sound.
we have like 2 minutes left.
All right.
So, with these last 2 minutes, I want to talk just a little bit about drumsticks. Because drumsticks matter a little bit too. Matter a lot. Somebody said it earlier about, you know, how you feel when you play makes a big difference. You know, drumstick has a lot to do with that. I mean, the confidence you have when you're holding the stick, how it feels in your hand, all those different things. One of the things we're working on at ProMark, the right ones, is a way to help drummers find a stick that works for them based upon real numbers. 5A doesn't mean diddly squat. A ProMark 5A is totally different than a Vic Firth 5A, and totally different than a Vader 5A. You know, it doesn't mean anything anymore. And your drum teacher will say, go get a pair of 5As and a practice pad. You might come back with something totally out of what he wants you to have. We're working on a program called Select Balance. And it's flushing out, it's going to take time. It's not like we're saving the world with these things right now, but sooner or later it's going to make sense. The particular model number on this pair that I'm holding in my hand is RBH565TW. That's a lot more to say than 5A. But RB stands for rebound balance. This other pair is FBH, forward balance. The other 3 numbers are 565. That's the diameter of the stick. The T is for teardrop, W is for wood tip. The H in the beginning is for hickory. So I know everything about this drumstick from that number. Now, the difference between the rebound and the forward balance is right here. Everything about these two drumsticks is exactly the same, except for the length of the shaft here. The taper is 2.5 on this one and 2 inches on this one. So when you play this, more of the weight's toward the back of the stick. Play this one, you're driving into the drum more because the weight's towards the front. This is pulling back off the drum more. So now that I've figured that out, I like the 5.65 diameter. I like the forward balance, but boy, I sure wish I had a round tip. So look at the future. I like forward balance. FB, I like hickory. H, I like the 5.65. Love it. I want an acorn tip. A, W. I'm playing this gig. I like everything about that stick, but I want to use an oak for this. So now it's FBO. So you'll be able to basically create your own feel and know exactly everything you want to know about the drumstick as this whole thing flushes out. The other thing is different materials. What I have here, hickory, which is about 70% of the market. By the way, the old ProMark. The new ProMark. This one's maple. People play maple, start with this one, because it's a much lighter weight wood than hickory or oak. So you can play a bigger diameter stick, but less weight. Hickory is most traditional, it's an average weight, it holds up the best, except for oak. It's very durable, and the cool thing about hickory is when you're playing along, you know when it's going to break. You start feeling it, oh boy, this one's going to go. And then because you want to be cool to everybody in the audience, you let it break. But, and then there's oak. Oak is much more dense wood, it'll last longer, it's more durable. You just don't know when it's going to break. Pretty soon you're playing along, you notice it's broken, you notice your bass player has a half a drumstick sticking out of his ear, and it went. But people like the oak because it feels very solid. Like the hickory because it's just the way it responds. Maple because they use a bigger diameter and lighter weight. Those are the three main materials. The other thing, hot rods, things like that, as drummers and percussionists, we use different things to hit things with because we want different tone. If anybody comes to you and says, you need to get some of those things, hot rods, yeah, that's it, because you need to play quieter. I'll play quiet if I don't play quiet. I don't need those to do that. I use those because I want a different tone. And you'll notice we have hot rods and we have cool rods. We have thunder rods, we have lightning rods. They all match up to create different tones. Personally, as some pieces I played with knitting needles, because that was the tone I wanted. So all these different woods produce a different tone, different tips produce a different tone, nylon's different tone on cymbals and drum heads. It's everything we talked about tonight with tuning. Now with a little bit we're talking about with drumsticks, it's all about tone. Because we're not animals, we're musicians. We care about tone, we care about how we sound, we care about our instruments, and we're going to spend time and try. Next time you change your drum heads, buy 18 Evans drum heads, just buy a couple extras and experiment, play around, because we care about how we sound. Otherwise you probably wouldn't even be here tonight. Which, by the way, because it's 7 o'clock, I will finish up with, you're also at one of the best music stores in California and in the United States. And one of the things that every time I talk about anything in this store, is it's really thanking people for shopping at a store like this, shop local, and support these guys. Bring your friends, tell everybody to come here, because you're going to come in here and get expertise like this. You'll get, yeah.
What's his name?
Yeah, he's still an expert, so tap into it while you can. He's getting a little old, but basically, this is the heart of music right here. And we are not drummers, we are musicians. So anyway, I'm going to finish with thanks for coming, but we'll be up here for more questions. I've got some goodies to give away. I'm going to do that right now, so don't move too far. Now you want to finish it?
Yeah, we just want to thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And if you've got any real problems with something with a snare drum or something, bring it in, let me look at it. I'm glad to take care of it. things like that if I can, except for you, Kurt.
Yeah, the vibration, yeah.